This happened a few months ago. I was working the night shift at the city hospital I had been at for 5 years. It was old and had long, sterile corridors. The lights flickered sometimes, and I always felt a bit uneasy at night. But that night was different. At around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps echoing down the hall. At first I thought someone else was on duty. I sat up and listened closely. The noise faded, and I checked the time. I was the only one there. A chill ran down my spine as I walked to the nurse's station trying to shake it off. I heard the distant hum of machines, but it felt like something else was off too. The following nights were even stranger. I started finding patient files I didn't recognize. The details were horrifying. I saw treatments I had never administered. I felt confused and a bit scared. Shadows seemed to move at the corners of my vision. I couldn't tell if I was really seeing them. Maybe it was just my tired mind playing tricks. One night, I felt a cold breeze as I stepped into one of the patient rooms. I shivered and looked around. Nobody was there, yet the temperature dropped more. I could almost see my breath. A knot formed in my stomach. Nurses aren't usually scared at work, right? But something felt very wrong. Then came the night I stumbled across a medical chart with my name on it. Mark Jones, patient. I had never treated anyone by that name. Panic flooded through me as I flipped through the file. It had procedures listed that made no sense. The notes hinted at things I didn't remember. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I wanted to dismiss it as a joke, but deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. I felt hard to breathe. I could feel it tightening in my chest. Who was this patient? What did it mean for me? The darkness felt like something was lurking, just out of sight. I couldn't shake the feeling. The last thing I remember was standing in the dark ER wondering if I should even stay. Then I heard a voice say my name. It felt familiar, yet far away. I turned around, but nobody was there. My heart was racing. The air felt heavy. I wanted to run but couldn't move. I left the hospital that night. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that happened. I kept piecing the incidents together. I had heard footsteps, seen strange charts, and felt the cold blast of air. Each thing added to my fear. The unease stayed with me long after my shift ended. I still don't know what it all means. I didn't sleep well for weeks after that. Each time I went back to work, I felt like I was being watched. Sometimes, I even thought I could hear my name again. But I could never find the source. Each night the shadows continued to dance just out of reach. The next few weeks at work were a blur. Each night felt heavier than the last. I dreaded my shifts but needed the paycheck. I tried to focus on my patients, but my mind kept drifting back to those unsettling experiences. Each time I heard footsteps, I jumped. Each time the shadows danced in my peripheral vision, my skin prickled. One night, I decided to confront my fears. I found myself roaming the dimly lit hallways, determined to uncover the truth. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, and I prayed they wouldn't flicker. I turned corner after corner, peeking into patient rooms, looking for signs of life or anything that made sense. Just when I thought I was going to break down, I stumbled upon the break room. I stepped inside, hoping for a moment of normalcy. The small table was cluttered with bowls and a few chairs, but I found something more disturbing sitting on the counter. It was another chart, and it had a familiar name. Alex Palmer. I almost dropped it when I saw it. He was a patient I had helped weeks ago, but the file detailed procedures that had never happened. My heart raced as I flipped through it. Each page revealed twisted notes making allegations against my colleagues. Anxiety bubbled up inside me. What was happening? Why was I being shown these files? I began to question my own actions. Did I forget something important? Had I been awake too long? Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered, drawing my attention to the door. I felt a rush of cold air sweep past me. I hesitated, feeling a pull to investigate. When I reached for the doorknob, the lights went out completely, plunging the break room into darkness. I cursed under my breath and fought the urge to panic. The silence was suffocating. I fumbled to find my phone, desperate for any light. The small screen illuminated the room. That's when I saw it, a shadow shifting near the far wall. It wasn't an illusion, it was something real. The shape seemed to pulse and writhe, melting into the dark corners of the room. "Is someone there?" I called out, but my voice trembled. There was no answer. The shadow lingered for just a moment longer, and then it vanished. I stumbled back, heart racing. I slammed the door behind me and bolted down the hall. I couldn't shake the image from my mind. What had I just witnessed? I needed to know more, but fear gripped me tighter than ever. As I reached the nurse's station, I caught a glimpse of a chart on the side. This one was different. It had my name on it. Again. I felt a chill wash over me. What they wrote next froze my blood. Marked for treatment. My fingers trembled as I tried to understand. Treatment for what? Why me? That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft and haunting. "Mark." It echoed through the empty halls, felt like a whisper in my ear. I turned around slowly, dread wrapping around my chest. I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. I needed answers. But as I stepped deeper into the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was haunting me was waiting. Waiting to reveal itself. I tightened my grip on my phone as I stepped into the hallway, the dim light casting eerie shadows against the walls. The whisper had rattled me, but I couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not when I felt something was right at the edge of my understanding. I took a deep breath and walked toward the supply room. I needed to gather my courage, to face whatever was happening here. The whisper still echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was unsettling to think about how deeply I was entwined in this mysterious web. As I neared the supply room, another sound caught my attention, a rush of footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, but there was only silence. My heart raced. Maybe it was just my imagination, fueled by fear and fatigue, but I couldn't ignore the ominous pull in my gut that told me I wasn't alone. The supply room loomed before me. I opened the door gingerly, and a blast of cool air greeted me. Inside, the shelves were crammed with boxes and medical supplies. I flicked on the light, and the fluorescent bulbs hummed reluctantly to life. The light flickered slightly, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I began to rummage through the boxes, searching for anything that might shed light on the shadows I had encountered. That's when I noticed a familiar object peeking out from the corner of a cardboard box. A scalpel. My stomach dropped. I had seen this scalpel last with an investigation team months ago when they had questioned some of the staff about suspected malpractice. As I pulled it out, something scratched at the bottom of the box. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cleared away some items. My fingers brushed against a file marked with the hospital's official seal. My heart hammered as I opened it, unveiling details about unexplained incidents and patient complaints against the staff, including a list of witnesses. Then my breath caught in my throat. The last name on the list sent chills through my body. Dr. Halverson. He was one of the head physicians at the hospital, someone I had always looked up to, but the file suggested he was involved in questionable activities. I couldn't believe this was happening. Before I could process any further, the sound of a door slamming echoed down the hall. My heart dropped into my stomach. I slammed the box shut and rushed to the doorway. Peering out, I saw a figure moving through the dim light. It was hard to make out, just a silhouette against the flickering lights. "Who's there?" I called out, voice shaking. The figure stopped and turned toward me, but the light failed again, plunging the hall into darkness. That's when I heard it. The whispers again, closer this time, circling like a predator. "Mark. Mark." They filled my ears, drowning out everything else. Panic gripped me as I turned to run, clenching the file in my hand. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping deeper into something I couldn't comprehend. As I sprinted back down the corridor, my mind raced with the implications of what I had found. There were secrets here. Dark ones that didn't just haunt the hospital, but me too. I needed to find answers fast. But the question weighed heavily on my mind. Who was truly behind this game? And what would happen when the shadows finally stepped into the light? I bolted down the corridor, the whispers fading, but the feeling of dread growing. The dimly lit hallway twisted around me as I ran, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. I needed to get to the nurse's station, where I could at least find someone else, some reassurance that I wasn't losing my mind. As I turned a corner, I skidded to a halt. A shadow moved across the far wall, flickering like a candle flame. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breath, but the unease was overwhelming. I squinted, peering into the dimness, but nothing emerged. Only silence enveloped me, thick and unsettling. After a moment, I forced myself to move again, creeping toward the nurse's station. When I reached it, I glanced back down the hallway, half expecting to see someone standing there. But all that greeted me was an empty corridor, the air heavy with anticipation. "Hey, is anyone here?" I called out softly. Only the hum of fluorescent lights responded. I hesitated, then advanced toward the desk, scanning for any signs of my colleagues. Glancing around, I noticed something chilling. The computer screen was on, but it was displaying a series of patient files. Each name was familiar, but I focused on one. A patient discharged just days ago, a young woman named Clara. The memory struck me like a bolt of lightning. I had spent hours with Clara during her stay. She had suffered a mental breakdown, often talking about voices that told her to do things. I remembered the look in her eyes when she said they whispered secrets. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, breaking my focus. I fumbled to pull it from my pocket and checked the screen. A message from an unknown number flashed. "Stop looking for the truth, Mark. You're too close." My skin crawled. Someone knew I was investigating. I dropped the phone on the desk, panic surging through me. Had Clara been right? Were there secrets hidden here that I couldn't grasp? Just then, a loud crash echoed from the back of the station. I jumped, adrenaline flooding my veins. I hesitated, torn between fear and the need to discover more, but my instincts pushed me forward. I approached the doorway leading to the supply closet. With shaking hands, I peeked inside. It was dark, shadows swirling in the corners. I could hear the remnants of my own breathing, steady but frantic. I took a cautious step inside, feeling the weight of the air around me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, something caught my attention. A figure crouched low beside a shelf, their face barely illuminated by the flickering light. I opened my mouth to shout, but the words caught in my throat. I recognized the figure. It was Dr. Halverson. His back was to me, but I could see his hands reaching for something on the floor. I cleared my throat, trying to summon the courage to speak. "Dr. Halverson?" At the mention of his name, he froze. His head snapped around, eyes wild. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, voice low and urgent. "You need to leave now." Before I could respond, his attention shifted behind me. I turned, and that's when everything went dark. The lights flickered wildly, and the shadows began to close in around me. I felt that suffocating dread wrap tight around my chest. I staggered back against the shelf, realizing too late that this was only the beginning. "What do you know?" I yelled into the suffocating blackness, desperate for answers. But all I could hear was the sound of whispers, getting louder, closing in, as if answering my question. I blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness, but it felt like the shadows were closing in on all sides. Panic gripped me. The whispers were louder now, a cacophony of voices murmuring in a language I couldn't comprehend. I tried to focus, tried to remember Dr. Halverson's warning, but the noise was overwhelming. Then, without warning, the lights flickered back on. I squinted against the harsh glare, my pulse racing. Dr. Halverson was gone. The supply closet was empty except for scattered items on the floor. My heart raced as I looked around, attempting to regain my bearings. What had just happened? I stepped cautiously back into the hallway, my mind racing. I had to find Dr. Halverson, but he felt more like a ghost than ever. I decided to retrace my steps to the nurse's station, but the corridor stretched before me, unfamiliar and labyrinthine. A shiver ran down my spine. I paused, trying to tune out the persistent whispers. "Focus," I muttered to myself. "There has to be a reason for all of this." I noticed doors lining the corridor, all locked except for one at the far end. It was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkness. I approached, heart pounding in my ears. With every step I took, the whispers faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. Pushing the door slightly open, I peered inside. The room was filled with medical equipment, charts scattered haphazardly across a desk. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and something else, something metallic. On the far wall, I spotted a bulletin board cluttered with notes and photos. My breath caught. I recognized Clara's face among those pinned up. But it wasn't just her. It was my colleagues, too. All of them entwined in a web of scribbled lines and disturbing phrases. I stepped closer, heart racing as I read snippets of notes. "The voices will guide you," one read. Another warned, "Trust no one." I stumbled back, realizing the extent of the secret swirling inside this place. The feeling of dread washed over me, swirling like the shadows I had seen moments before. I turned to leave, my mind buzzing with questions. How was Clara connected to all this? Why were my colleagues involved? Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "Mark." It was soft and almost melodic, yet laced with urgency. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just the room, still and eerie. My heart raced anew. I had to get out. I darted back to the hallway, fear propelling me forward. That's when I saw it. Someone was standing at the end of the hall, shrouded in darkness. I froze. It looked like Dr. Halverson, but something felt off. I couldn't breathe as my eyes adjusted. "Mark," the figure said again, voice echoing strangely. "You need to know the truth." Before I could process what was happening, the door to my right burst open, and a pair of hands yanked me inside. I gasped as I was thrown against a wall, my eyes adjusting to see it was Dr. Halverson. "Listen to me," he urged, his voice frantic. "They're coming for you." And just like that, I knew. This was far from over. Dr. Halverson's hands were on my shoulders, shaking me gently but urgently. "Mark, we don't have much time," he said. His eyes were wide with fear, a stark contrast to the calm demeanor I had known. "You need to trust me if you want to get out of here." "Get out of where?" I demanded, pushing back against the wall for some distance. "What's going on?" He hesitated, glancing at the door as though he expected someone to come barging in at any moment. "There are things happening in this hospital that you don't understand. I thought I could keep you safe, but it's worse than I imagined." "Worse?" I shook my head, struggling to wrap my mind around his words. "What's worse than all of this?" Before he could answer, I heard footsteps echoing outside the door, heavy and deliberate. My heart raced, the sense of danger washing over me again. "We have to move," Halverson urged, leading me towards the back of the room, where a narrow window was framed by dusty blinds. "But it's locked," I protested, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on me. "Not for long." He pulled a pocket knife from his scrubs and started working on the latch. The footsteps drew closer, the sound growing louder as I felt the panic rise inside me again. In moments that felt like an eternity, the window clicked open. Halverson shoved it to the side and gestured for me to climb through first. I hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll follow. Just go." His voice was sharp, leaving no room for argument. Making my way through the window, my legs hit the ground outside, a rush of night air filling my lungs. I turned quickly, looking back for Halverson, but just as I did, the door swung open. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the fluorescent hospital lights, and all my fears coiled tight in my stomach. "Dr. Halverson?" I called, panic creeping back in. But he didn't respond. I felt a jolt of dread at the sight of the figure, an image cutting through my mind of the bulletin board with his name pinned among the others. Before I could process what to do, Halverson jumped out the window, landing beside me in a crouched position. He took my arm and dragged me away from the wall. "We need to go now." The sound of voices echoed from the hallway behind us, filled with urgency. "Bring him to me," one voice insisted, sharp and commanding. "Who are they?" My voice trembled as we sprinted down the dimly lit path behind the hospital. Halverson's breathless reply sent a chill down my spine. "People who know more about this place than they should. They're looking for someone, and I think it's you." We rounded a corner, and suddenly, the world shifted. A figure loomed ahead, an arbitrary shadow blocking our path. My pulse throttled in my throat. "Stop!" It was a voice I recognized. Clara. "Clara, thank God!" I gasped, relief washing over me. But as I took in her expression, wide-eyed and frantic, I felt doubt creeping back in. Why was she here? "Mark!" she shouted, but it was not the excited greeting I expected. "You have to run! There!" Before she finished, the ground beneath us trembled. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but I stood frozen, staring into her eyes while chaos unfolded around us. And that's when I saw it, a shadow darting in the periphery, slinking closer. The figure behind Clara. I had to make a choice, but my mind was racing. Trust was slipping away as fast as I could think. Then everything went dark. When I regained my bearings, I was lying on the cold ground. The air felt thick, heavy with tension and fear. I bolted upright, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I was alone. "Clara?" I whispered, my voice trembling. No answer. Only silence, pierced by a distant siren wailing far off. I forced myself to stand, scanning the area. The night was ink black, shrouded in shadows that danced at the edges of my vision. I turned back toward the hospital, the bulky structure looming behind me like a watchful giant. Questions filled my mind. What happened to Clara? Where was Halverson? Then, movement caught my eye. A figure slipped between two dumpsters, their silhouette briefly illuminated by a flickering streetlight. My heart quickened again. The instinct to run made me hesitate. Did I dare investigate, or was it safer to flee back into the night? I took a step closer, curiosity pushing aside my fear. "Hello?" The word slipped from my lips. The figure paused, then turned. It was a man, his face partially hidden under a hood. He looked young, maybe my age, but his eyes carried the weight of someone far older. "Mark, right?" he said, his voice low and gravelly. "They've been looking for you." I took a step back instinctively. "Who are you?" "No time for that," he insisted, glancing over his shoulder. "I'm here to help you. You can't trust them." He gestured toward the hospital. "They want to take you back inside." "What does that mean? Why can't I trust anyone?" My frustration spilled out, mixing with the confusion. He took a breath. "You're part of something bigger, a project that went wrong. That's why they need you. They think you have information." "Information about what?" I pressed. "The accident, but you don't know what they did, do you?" His eyes searched mine, a mixture of urgency and something else. Fear? Before I could answer, the sound of boots echoed through the alley, sharp and purposeful. "We need to go." He took my arm and started to pull me towards the far end of the alley. "Stay close." I stumbled after him, my mind racing with panic. What accident? What project? The footsteps grew louder, echoing off the walls. I felt trapped, like a puppet with the strings being pulled tighter. Suddenly he stopped. "Wait." He pressed me against the wall, his breath heavy. I held my own, listening intently. "Please, don't let them find you," he whispered, his voice strained. Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he turned and sprinted into the darkness, vanishing in an instant. "Hey!" I shouted, but the night swallowed my voice whole, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. I turned to retreat back toward the exit, but a figure emerged from the shadows. "There you are." It wasn't Clara or Halverson. It was the silhouette from the hospital, the one blocking our path before everything had gone dark. "Get away from me!" I shouted, but doubt knotted in my gut. I couldn't outrun this. I felt trapped as a sickening realization washed over me. They were all connected to whatever was happening. And then I remembered the man's warning. I didn't want to go back inside, but I had nowhere else to turn. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The unmistakable desire to fight pulsing through my veins, because now, it was clear. I needed answers, and I had to get them before it was too late. I faced the shadowy figure standing in front of me, heart racing. I'd never felt so exposed. The dim light from the flickering street lamp barely illuminated his features. With every instinct screaming at me to run, I stood my ground. "Where's Clara?" I demanded, my voice shaky but firm. Clara isn't safe, he answered, taking a step closer. You need to come with me. Where? Why should I trust you? The questions poured out like a dam breaking. Because those people are dangerous. You don't know what they want from you. His eyes bore into mine, practically pleading. I shook my head, uncertainty consuming me. His words echoed the man in the alley, but could I risk following another stranger? Footsteps echoed again, louder this time. The silhouette tensed, glancing down the alley, then back to me. You really don't have much time. They want to recapture you. Recapture? You mean I've been taken? I barely processed the words before he grabbed my wrist. Come on. He pulled me toward the rear of the alley, dragging me out of the streetlight's glow. I felt the wall's rough surface against my back, my breath quickening with the proximity of danger. Our hurried movements were punctuated by the growing sounds of commotion. I could hear distant shouts, orders barked out from people who wanted me back, whoever they were. Staying put was no longer an option. Who are you? I asked, desperation edging into my tone. He glanced at me, his expression caught between concern and urgency. I'm Jacob. I'm someone who knows. Just trust me. Trust? The word tasted foreign on my lips. He dragged me further down the alley, leading me to an unmarked door tucked away behind a row of crates. In here, he whispered urgently, pushing the door open slightly. We'll be safer inside. I hesitated, fearing the unknown, but the footsteps approached faster, and I felt a strange pull to follow this barely known ally. With a final glance toward the alley's mouth, I stepped inside without another word. The moment I crossed the threshold, Jacob slammed the door shut, casting us into near-complete darkness. What now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He breathed heavily beside me. Now we wait until it's clear. As my eyes adjusted, I took in the small space cluttered with boxes and old furniture. It felt abandoned, but it was also a refuge, at least for the moment. The muffled sounds of the outside world faded to whispers in the back of my mind. Then, something caught my eye. A faint glow emitted from the corner of the room. I stepped toward it, nearly tripping over a chair in the process. There, on an old projector, static flickered across a screen. Wait! Jacob's voice startled me. Don't touch that! But it was too late. I pressed a button and the static cleared, revealing images of familiar faces. Footage from the hospital? My heart clenched as I recognized Clara and Halverson in discussions, their expressions serious. Then I saw something else. A flashing red light. A containment breach warning. What is this? Panic surged through me. What happened? Jacob stepped in beside me, eyes widening at the images. This is what I was afraid of. They never wanted you to see this. The urgency of the situation wrapped around me. There was so much I didn't understand, and the night felt far from over. Just then, a loud bang echoed outside and the door shuddered. They're here, Jacob hissed. I couldn't believe how quickly the tide had turned. All I wanted were answers, and now danger was closing in. All I could think was to find the truth before it crushed me, before I lost everything again. The bang reverberated in my chest, sending a fresh wave of panic through me. I felt Jacob's body tense beside me. We need to get out of here now, he whispered urgently. I turned frantically, searching for another exit. The window was covered with dust and grime, but it was my only option. Can we climb out? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jacob stepped back, eyes darting as he tried to formulate a plan. If we can get to the back of the building. Another loud thud interrupted him, this time accompanied by heavy footsteps. My breath hitched. Whoever was out there, they were close. What if they come in? We'll have to be quick, he said, looking back to the door. If it breaks down, I'll stall. You go through the window, just don't look back. I nodded, but instinct twisted my stomach in knots. I didn't want to leave him, but I knew we were out of time. The footsteps grew louder and there was a low murmur of voices just outside. Now, Jacob commanded, pushing me toward the window. The frame felt cold against my hands as I pulled it open. I could see a narrow alley outside, just wide enough for a quick jump down, but what lay beyond it was unknown. I hesitated for a breath, then climbed onto the sill. The sound of the door splintering made me jump. I threw myself out, landing hard on my feet. I stumbled but quickly regained my balance. "Go!" Jacob urged from behind me as I turned to see him facing the door. I didn't need to be told twice. I dashed down the alley, my breaths harsh and erratic. The night air felt sharp against my throat. I ran without looking back, glancing at the surrounding buildings for signs of movement. The shadows felt alive, ready to swallow me whole. My instinct drove me deeper into the labyrinth of the city, desperate to put distance between us and whatever was happening behind me. "Left!" Jacob shouted, pointing down a narrower street. I veered left, despairing at the idea of losing him. The path looked empty, but the silence of the night was deceptive. "Where are we going?" I gasped, glancing back. "To a safe spot. I know a place," he replied, his voice steady despite the urgency in our flight. "Just keep running." I pushed myself harder, my legs burning as adrenaline coursed through my veins. We rounded another corner, where an iron gate blocked our way. I skidded to a halt. "Jacob," he cursed under his breath, assessing the gate. "We can climb over. It's our best shot." I nodded, and together we scrambled up the rusted bars, my pulse racing with each inch scaled. On the other side, the ground was more uneven, littered with debris. I landed awkwardly, but kept moving. Behind us, I could hear the murmur of voices rising, panic igniting again. "Where's Clara?" I shouted, my heart racing for my sister and the chaos lurking around us. "First we need to hide," Jacob called back, urgency saturating his tone. "There's an old storage unit nearby." I felt the weight of dread heavy in my gut, but I didn't argue. We ducked around a corner, and suddenly the lights flickered on overhead, illuminating the crumbling concrete. That's when I saw it. A van parked at the edge of the lot with the doors ajar. My heart sank as I recognized the logo on the side. It was from the hospital. "Jacob." My voice trailed off as I pushed forward, knowing something wasn't right. Climbing into the van, I paused, the sense of foreboding sharpening. An urge to retreat flared within me. What are they doing? Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was inside the van, tied to a chair. Panic surged through me. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. My heart raced as I tested the ropes binding my wrists and ankles, but they were tight. I glanced around, disoriented and afraid. A flickering light overhead cast shadows across the cramped interior. "Mark," a voice sliced through the silence. It was Dr. Halverson, but he looked different. Shadows under his eyes and a grim expression twisted his visage. He was sitting nearby, staring at me, his hands on his knees as though he were preparing for a confession. "Why would you bring me here?" I shouted, my voice strained and raw. "This isn't what it looks like." His voice trembled. He glanced back at the open door, as if expecting someone to come charging in. "You were never meant to be a part of this." "What are you talking about?" I felt a rush of emotions, confusion, anger, fear. "You used me. I saw the files, Halverson. You're all involved in something terrible." "It's not what you think," he pleaded, voice rising slightly, panic creeping in. "There are forces at play you don't understand. I thought I could keep you safe, but they're searching for you." I looked around, desperation clawing at my stomach. "Where is Clara? Is she okay?" "She's—" He hesitated, eyes brimming with something like regret. "She's in danger too. But you need to listen, you have to get out of here." Before I could respond, the van's doors burst open, illuminating the dim interior with bright, glaring lights. A figure stepped into view, cloaked in shadows, a man in a crisp suit. He surveyed us with a chilling smile, a glint of authority in his eyes. "Dr. Halverson, how nice to see you again." His voice was smooth, almost mocking. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. "Reed," Halverson spat, teeth clenched. "You don't have to do this." "On the contrary, I do. You've meddled too much on behalf of our guest. It's time he learns the truth." Reed turned his penetrating gaze toward me. "Mark, we've been watching you for quite some time. You have something we need, a direct connection to our research. I don't have anything, I shot back, panic gripping me. Let me go. Oh, you will. But first you need to understand what you're a part of. Reed stepped closer, casting a shadow over Halverson and me. You're the key to something greater. This entire situation wasn't supposed to end like this. What? There's so much more at stake than you imagine, Reed continued, almost gloating. All the whispers, the shadows. You're part of an intricate web, Mark. The accident, the voices you dismissed. These were all leading to you. Resentment stirred in me. Stop it. I don't know anything. My heart raced as Reed leaned in closer. You will know soon enough. He turned suddenly, his voice curt. Prepare him for the procedure. Before I could interpret his words, a hand reached from behind me and injected something into my arm. A warm sensation surged through me, tapping into the primal fear imbued in my being. My vision blurred, the room spinning as darkness encroached on the edges of my consciousness. Mark! I caught a glimpse of Halverson shouting, panic evident in his eyes before everything faded to black. I woke again, not in the van, but in a dimly lit room. Metal walls surrounded me, and a soft buzzing filled the air. I struggled to sit up, my body heavy with confusion and dread. I glanced around but saw no sign of Halverson or Reed. Panic bubbled up inside. What were they planning? How far had they gone? I thought of Clara, of the shadows. Were they truly watching me? The weight of the uncertainty seemed to press down, constricting my breath. Silence engulfed the room, broken only by the hum of machinery. I fought against the panic consuming me. There had to be a way out. As I shifted my legs, I felt the coolness of metal beneath my feet. Then faint voices echoed from outside. I turned my head, listening intently. It was a mix of conversations, but one voice rose above the rest, sharp and clear. Clara. My heart leapt. She was nearby, but where? I reached for the door, testing the handle. It was locked. Frustration surged through me, but I refused to relent. I focused on the voices, trying to piece together what was happening outside. It felt like hours passed, but finally, it became clear. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was the man from the alley, Jacob. He scanned the room quickly, eyes widening in realization. Mark, thank God, he breathed, rushing over to me. I thought they'd taken you for good. Clara? I asked, my voice hoarse. Where is she? Jacob's expression darkened. They have her. We need to go. Now. With renewed urgency, he worked to free me from the restraints. As soon as I was released, the fear washed away and was replaced by a spark of resolve. Which way? I asked, looking into his determined eyes. Not that way. He motioned toward the door. They'll be coming for you. There's an emergency exit at the end of the hall. The urgency ignited something inside me. Jacob guided me through the wild maze of corridors, skirting shadows that felt alive. We moved quickly, each step accompanied by the sound of our hurried breaths. Finally, we reached the emergency exit. Jacob pushed the door open and a rush of cool night air hit me. I exhaled deeply, taking in the familiar sense of the outside world as flashing lights painted the scene ahead. But a sense of foreboding lingered, like a storm brewing just out of reach. Mark! Jacob's voice snapped me from my thoughts. This isn't over. They'll come for you again. We ran together toward the fence that lined the back of the property, leaping over debris and twisted metal. But even as we made our escape, a sense of ambiguity hung in the air. Why me? What had I tied myself to? My mind raced with the questions swirling around, unanswered, as the distance between the horror of the hospital and my body grew. We hurried, but the unease clawed at the edges of my mind. I still felt the whispers, faint but persistent, laced with truths that I was not ready to face. As we reached the edge of the property, the reality hit. This was only the beginning. I chose the darkness that wrapped around me like a familiar friend, but what I found just beyond its grasp was something incredibly unfamiliar, something that could ultimately unravel everything I knew.